Good evening and welcome to the May meeting of the Salem Kaiser Transit Board. This evening on our agenda we have a number of consent items which include approval of the minutes of the April 8th meeting work session and the adoption of the 2020 fiscal year board meeting schedule. We have some action items to authorize the general manager to execute a purchase of 2 data storage arrays, and we also have authorized me as the president to send a letter to the Oregon Transportation and Growth Management Program on behalf of the board to support the program and a grant that we're applying for. We will be followed up by various reports, and that will conclude our meeting. So with that, I will call the meeting to order. I'll ask our clerk to take attendance, and we do have a quorum. And with that, I'll call on Director Bush to lead us in pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any? First we will go to our safety moment from our general manager.
Thank you. So the safety moment this week is a pretty sad one. I'm going to divert from our normal monthly theme to share with you, in case you hadn't heard, over the weekend. The public transit industry lost one of its own to a tragic incident. At the Hillsborough Area Regional Transit District in Tampa, Florida, they lost transit operator Thomas Dunn to a senseless stabbing aboard the bus. Operator Dunn was driving his bus when he was tragically stabbed, and despite his injuries, he was able to pull the bus off to the side of the road, ensuring the safety of his passengers. Police were able to apprehend the alleged perpetrator nearby, and while this is an extremely rare incident, it's exactly why we place an extreme importance on safety here at the district and identify safety as our top organizational value. And at the APTA conference, we expressed our condolences on behalf of the industry to all the folks in Tampa. So sad news, but just know that our safety folks and security folks are extremely diligent in making sure we're prepared for any incident, even though it looked like this one was just kind of a random attack, but always an important time to take a step back and remember things happen, and that's why we train and prepare.
Thank you. Are there any announcements or changes to the agenda? And I believe we have one additional item C. We're going to have a short video. Other than that, are there any changes? I would like to make my monthly announcement that we have 107 days until Saturday service starts. And now we've reached the time for public comment, or excuse me, we have our video first.
So, and I'll report more on this later and during the general manager's report, but this past week was the APTA Mobility Conference in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm going to share a video that was shown at the opening session of the conference. It's about a 2-minute video, interesting montage, but I would ask you to pay attention, especially at about the 34-second mark. You may see a familiar bus in the photo. So with that.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay. Full screen it?
6, 5,
Make it full screen.
4, 3, 2, 1.
never mind. So this was the opening video to start the conference. Over 750 people were in attendance. Just thought I'd share that, thought you might enjoy that.
That's great.
Thank you. And now we have reached the period for public comment, and do we have anyone signed up for public comment? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment? If not, we will move on to our consent calendar. And do we have a motion on the consent calendar?
Move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And the first action item is to authorize the general manager to execute a purchase of 2 data storage arrays in the amount of $183,565 from CDW-G. So I'll call on our general manager to introduce that.
Sure, I'd ask Chip Colby, Technology Services Manager, to please come forward.
Good evening, President Krebs and members of the board. I'm Chip Colby, Manager of Information Technology. The matter I'm here to present to you today is to seek approval for the purchase of 2 new data storage units for the district. The district's data set, or data sets plural actually, have grown significantly over the last several years, and as such we've reached a point where we need to add additional storage to accommodate this growth. These data sets are comprised of files related to technology solutions that have been implemented or will soon be implemented, as well as space to manage ongoing data backups. In the case of backups, we're looking to move closer to the industry best practice of having 8-hour backup rotations. Similarly, to ensure data integrity, we have a replication process that has our data sets stored both at the Downtown Transit Center or up on CH2 in the county's computer room, as well as the Dell Web Operations Facility, so that we can continue to access critical data should one facility go offline. The request before you is to authorize the general manager to execute the purchase of 2 storage arrays for the amount of $183,565. This project was budgeted as part of the fiscal year 19 budget and was competitively bid via an invitation to bid. We received 4 total bids, and the lowest bid came from CDW-G, a leading reseller of computer equipment for government and public agencies. That's what the G stands for, is government, and someone we acquire technology from quite regularly. The other bidders were SHI International, Zoned, and the Horos Group. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about this equipment.
Do we have any questions? Director Bush.
Just curious, was there a large difference between the different bidders?
There was a considerable difference between bidders. The successful bid was nearly $200,000 less than the highest bid,
Okay.
which was very surprising considering the configuration is identical.
Considering what?
The configuration was identical.
Right.
Other questions, or are we ready for a motion? Director Lincoln?
I move that the board authorize the general manager to execute the purchase of 2 data storage arrays in the amount of $183,565.44 from CDW-G for the purpose of storing and protecting backups of all district data.
Second.
Been moved and second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. We'll move on to the next action item, which is to authorize the president of the board to send a letter to the Oregon Transportation and Growth Management Program on behalf of the board in support of Salem Area Mass Transit District's grant application to complete a new 20-year long-range plan for Cherriots local and regional services. And I'll call on our general manager to introduce that topic.
Steve Dickey, Director of Transportation Development, will present the staff report.
Good evening, President Krebs, members of the board. The Salem Area Mass Transit District is applying for a Transportation Growth and Management Program grant to create a new long-range transit plan for the district. This plan is designed to replace not just one, but multiple plans that we've done over the past several years that have been either intermediate or long-range, but have been really targeted either at local level or at regional levels. The focus of this plan is to create a 20-year plan for the district that would encompass not just our local service, but all of our regional services and contracted services as well. The program is a program that is managed under the oversight of the Oregon Department of Transportation and the Department of Land Conservation and Development. So it is a co-managed program, and it provides funding for projects such as this on an annual basis. We have applied for this in an amount that is about $200,000, which will include not only the consultant fees, which is actually a contract managed by ODOT, but also would include fees for our public outreach, bringing on, the contractor would be able to bring on groups of temporary staff if we need to for conducting survey work, and a variety of different activities that would be necessary to have the level of data collected and the work that will go into producing a plan of this magnitude. Creating this plan will give us a fresh basis for moving forward. One of the things that we are called upon on a regular basis is to provide a planning background when we apply for funds for our operational projects, such as our funding that we are doing right now for our new service that will be starting in September. One of the components that we had to provide were what are the planning documents to support the needs for this. And in that effort, we have had to provide references to multiple documents, and in some cases, we have some very old documents which we have referred to for quite a long time, back to 2004. This will give us a fresh new start, and as we move forward in the next steps for our district, for Cherriots in the future, it's a very important piece to have in place that gives us that foundation as we go forward seeking additional funding for new operations, as we come into the next biennium and present our needs for where we're going to spend those funds. This will give us the basis for supporting those requests. So as part of this application process, it has been recommended that we receive letters of support, and one of those letters of support is to come from the board of directors of our agency. So tonight we are requesting that the board would authorize the president to sign a letter of support in this project. And as you can see in your packets, we've also received a number of letters from the cities within our regional service area as well, supporting our application. And I would entertain any questions at this time.
Do we have any questions? Director Lincoln.
So you said ODOT's going to, there's a contractor that ODOT will actually oversee?
Yes, under this program, the recipients of the awardees of the Transportation and Growth Management grants are then put in a position where we work with ODOT, and they have a group of pre-qualified consultants that they work with that are eligible to take a look at then the various projects that have been approved that year for funding through the Transportation Growth Management Plan. The contract actually with those consultants is managed by ODOT, which for us means we don't have to go through the procurement process to bring on a consultant team. We don't have to manage issues around billing if there's a question, if there's a performance question. When we have been successful in the past, and it has been quite a number of years, even though we've applied annually, it's been a number of years since we've been awarded one of these grants. We did have a past situation where we had a particular member of a team that just wasn't performing at the level that we liked. We work with our contact at ODOT to address that, and they then address that through their contractual relationship with the consultant. So it actually is a nice way for us to be able to have the resources of that consultant team without having to have a lot of the administrative overhead of managing a consultant.
Right. So who at Cherriots would kind of be working with ODOT on this? Would that be you mostly?
That would be myself and our planning team, yes.
Is this a public process? I mean, as we're going through this planning thing, do we get input from the public or say, here's what we're tentatively planning and give us your feedback?
No, this type of a plan requires a significant amount of public input and public outreach.
Okay.
It requires us to do preliminary proposals of concepts often, and it's ideas and what are your priorities. And so a typical planning process would involve, a typical scenario is, do you prefer more frequent service or do you prefer better coverage? And that's often a conversation that's taking place, and depending on where you're serving will depend on the feedback that you get. That data is brought in, and then typically after that has been brought in and combined with historical data that we have, a proposal of service delivery is developed for that, typically in a long-range plan, the 5, 10, 15, and 20-year target goal. And then also along with that will be infrastructure development as well, because to support. So this type of a plan not just addresses operations, it also addresses something like at this point, at this level of growth, you may need to look at a transit center at this location, or you may need to look at adding this type of technology to better support what you're looking for. Then we will come back with the draft proposal to the public again, and then the public will provide the feedback on that before the final developed version is brought then to the board for adoption.
So how would this dovetail with our new money and our expanded service? Is it kind of maybe the cart before the horse until we know?
Actually, what we have put in place for this biennium is based on not just the 2004 plan. We have done both our comprehensive analysis of our system when Jarrett Walker was here. We had Jarrett Walker help us with our regional service. Our last TGM plan was done at a higher level for our regional service. We took the information that we gathered from that, plus information that we have received for the past 10 plus years from the public just on an ongoing basis, as the basis of where we placed our money as a priority this time, which was to restore Saturday service, to get the Sunday service, later evening service, which we had used to have, and then also the holidays, as being the first and foremost need. And that was really where we were able to put the money to the best use for this biennium. This plan will become very important for us as we approach the next biennium. And that next biennium, applying for the next round of the statewide transportation improvement funds, will be critical to have a comprehensive plan that's not fragmented and pieces of it here and pieces of it there, because it's going to be getting into newer areas and newer demands in areas where we haven't provided service in the past.
Interesting. That'll be interesting to see.
Yes.
Thanks.
Other questions? This would also address future technology, as we sort of have, like, electric buses are emerging now, and there's a new technology out there, and
yes,
whether we go that way or not, that will be some of the, and using different types of vehicles maybe to serve less populated areas, but still get service out there, so we're not running large buses.
Yes, it will look at the various types of service delivery, the types of vehicles that you would need for that, the new technologies. You're absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, no, I do.
Yes, Director Bush.
Does that include the transportation network companies as well?
It will look at the full
full array.
spectrum of transportation resources that are available today. And often when you get out into the outer years, and this is a document too that you will update typically on a 5-year cycle, because looking 20 years out, 20 years ago, if you talked about what we have today in the transportation network companies, that wasn't even a concept that we had in reality. That same type of thing, we don't know what's going to be available 20 years, so some of it is based on our best educated analysis of what we have available today, but then we will update it as we go as well.
One other.
Yes, Director
Sorry, just for
Bush.
clarification, you mentioned the biennium. Is that in relation to the legislature's biennium or just the transportation?
This is the biennial cycle that is tied to the statewide transportation improvement fund for transit.
Okay.
So we are in the 1920-21 fiscal years. The next one will be the 22-23.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
I think that is tied to the legislature because they meet the major session is every 2 years, and so they pass legislation and funding packages for 2 years. Other questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
I'll do it.
Director Bush?
I move that the board provide a letter of support to the Oregon Transportation and Growth Management Program for the application Salem Area Mass Transit District is submitting for a grant to complete a new 20-year long-range plan for Cherriots local and regional services.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Any comments or discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. And we now are into our informational reports, and I'll call on our General Manager to introduce the first topic, which is the Salem Congestion Relief Task Force.
Right, so Steve Dickey will present the reports.
So in November 2017, the City of Salem formed a congestion relief task force, and that was formed to find ways to alleviate traffic in the downtown area. This actually was really focused on the impacts, especially of the traffic that as it approaches the bridges from both sides, and the potential options that could be given to alleviate some of that congestion. The task force really focused on those approaches to the Marion Street and Center Street bridges from both sides. And they considered actually many, many options. And the fact that early on in this process, the conversation started out with, there are no ideas that we don't want to put on the board first. And so from the people that we heard from, there were quite a number of some really interesting, but also costly, not just in money, but also in time, options that were put out there as ideas. And as in any typical process like that, they quickly went through and then whittled it down to a manageable number of projects that they would be able to focus on. And that vetting process developed a short list of potential projects that could be implemented in a reasonable amount of time and with a reasonable budget. 2 of those options are related to Cherriots and the trip choice services that Cherriots provides. So on April 23rd, Transportation Planning Manager Julie Warnicki and Assistant Public Works Director Robert Chandler from the City of Salem met with General Manager Alan Pollock and myself to discuss these options. The options really boiled down to 2 areas. The first one involving Cherriots is the development of a downtown circulator bus or a downtown trolley. This is something that we have looked at off and on over the past many years in working with the city and working with the downtown businesses. But really, this is taking a more focused look at this. A number of things that came up during the conversation were how would we fund this? And in your report, you can see a number of options that were considered, anywhere from urban renewal dollars to downtown business dollars to could gas tax pay for a portion of some of the improvements. But the bottom line that still had to be answered is really what is the cost? What would it look like? How frequent does it need to operate? What type of vehicles would it be? Really the things that you would answer with a feasibility study. So both the staff from the City of Salem and ourselves agreed that probably the first step is to proceed with developing a feasibility study for a downtown circulator bus or trolley. As we looked at that, we felt that this year would be not a good time because we already have many, many things on the plate coming up in fiscal year 20. But what we did believe would be an appropriate approach would be to develop a scope of work to put together a cost estimate and funding agreement that we would put together so we could issue an RFP at the end of the fiscal year 20, approaching fiscal year 21. The proposal would be that then bringing on the consultant fiscal years 21 and 22 would be the years where we would work with the consultant to go through and develop the plan. Then if indeed the plan felt that this was a reasonable solution and that we would be moving forward with it, fiscal 23 would be the year that we would budget and prepare, with the target being of fiscal year 24. We estimated just in a rough basis that the cost of doing this study would be somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000, and that we would target this as being a 50-50 split with the City of Salem. It's a very rough estimate at this stage. We would be doing more research before we would put that out. Of course, we have to do our cost analysis as part of our procurement process. But it was something that also was agreed that if the funding was not available for the study by either agency, it would be then held off until the funding was made available, that the burden would not be put onto the other agency to fund it. The other portion of the recommendation was commute trip reduction program that would really be focused on developing a congestion reduction by encouraging employers to implement flexible work hours. When you look at the time when our roads are congested, it's actually a very concentrated periods of time in specific directions during the day. And a lot of that has to do with the start and end times for the workforce, the predominant workforce being public employees in the downtown core area. So the question was raised as to whether the city would be requiring commute trip reductions, or if this would be something that they would just impose upon themselves initially, or would it be something that they would impose on Marion County and state offices as well. A lot of questions arose, but really the approach is to look at how do we begin this. This is not dissimilar to a mandatory program in the Portland metro area, because that is required by the Department of Environmental Quality for the Portland metro area due to their it being for many, many years a non-attainment area. And they have what's called the ECO rule program for employers that have over 100 employees. They're required to have a commute reduction program, and that's a program that is required. Our trip choice staff have worked with individual agencies and have worked with this concept in the past, but this is really a focus that this congestion relief task force felt would be a positive way without a significant investment to encourage, it's called flattening the commute. So instead of everybody arriving at 8 o'clock and leaving at 5 o'clock, some arrive at 7, some arrive at 7:30, some arrive at 8, some arrive at 8:30. And by flattening that and at the end of the day, the same stagger as well. So you allow that congestion to spread out, and then you don't have as much of an issue with the backup. We are working with them to make sure that anything that we have available, such as our group pass program, and encouraging the City of Salem to be a participant in that as a part of this solution. We are working with them to make sure that our trip choice staff can be available whenever they have employee benefit fairs and employee informational fairs. And we regularly do that at this point with a lot of the state agencies. We did talk a lot about the group pass program, and the city could pay for everyone at the reduced rate of our group pass program, or they also talked about identifying those that would regularly use the bus and just purchase their passes outright. The Congestion Relief Task Force convened also public transit, or there was also, in addition to the Congestion Relief Task Force, the City of Salem also convened a public transit committee to investigate potential ways for the City of Salem to support public transportation system and advise the city on policies and actions to be adopted and implemented by the city to improve public transportation in the community. The committee was formed on May 22nd, 2017, and held their final meeting on October 23rd, 2018. They came up with a set of prioritizations, also our priorities as well. And they are as follows on page 3 of the memo in your board packet. They include prioritized transit supportive considerations as part of updating the Salem Comprehensive Plan with an emphasis on the transit core network. Review and update the Employee Smart Commuter Program to encourage city employees to use transit and other non-auto modes of transportation. Worked with Cherriots to update the 2009 Memorandum of Understanding and develop a common understanding of how the city and Cherriots will work together. And review 2003 intergovernmental agreement with Cherriots and report back to council regarding appropriate action. Coordinate with Cherriots to identify and implement projects to improve transit time reliability. And finally, evaluate the feasibility of downtown circulator bus. So another common thing with the Congestion Relief Task Force. One of the things, though, that as we wrapped up this meeting with the city staff that we agreed to is that we will begin having regular meetings with city staff that are just an ongoing set meeting to encourage better coordination and better cooperation between the two agencies. We work quite cooperatively with them, but our meetings typically are focused around specific projects or specific plans, and we felt just regular meetings would be beneficial into the future. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Director Lincoln.
You know, a lot of these suggestions were in the alternate mobility study, which was done, what, 6-8 years ago? And I'm just wondering what's different with this, that we think these things are actually going to maybe move forward? And you think the regular meetings with the city or elevating it to a more visible level so that people have some expectations that things actually get accomplished?
I believe that the regular meetings with the city will be one of the most positive ways to do that. That will help keep these things top of mind for them. It's our day-to-day business, but in their world, it's one of the many things that they have to accomplish and competing priorities and deadlines. So I think the regular meetings will happen. That will also open up the lines of communication for probably more regular and creative ways that we can work cooperatively and communicate on problem solving to address some of these things. I feel like the climate now is more open and agreeable to a cooperative working relationship. We have had, I would say over the past probably 3 to 5 years, I've seen a steady increase in supportive dialogue from city staff and a cooperative attitude where we've been working with them in a variety of different settings. And so you're correct, those were included in the mobility study. And sometimes you have to plant the seed, then you have to come back and cultivate that seed and keep it going and keep watering it, and eventually it'll sprout and grow. And I think that's what we need to do here, is look for positive ways for us to continue to encourage the city in this direction.
I would add, it also will certainly help if the board and the council have this as a part of their participation in working together and keeping it visible and alive at the elected level.
Even though we're no
Or
longer
appointed.
elected.
The governing body.
The government.
And we do have one of our incoming members was on that transit
Right,
committee.
two of them,
Oh, yes, 2.
right.
to approve here tonight.
In the audience
And
as
they're
we
listening.
speak.
I won't tell you which one I forgot.
They had great input during the
Yes, Director Lincoln?
One more question. When the Congestion Relief Task Force was meeting, did they discuss bus rapid transit or like express buses maybe across the river or from East Salem?
If you just give me a moment, I will make the request of the staff member that we had at those meetings.
Oh, okay.
Chris French, our senior planner, was.
The question was, did the committee ever discuss bus rapid transit as a congestion relieving measure or express lanes just for buses?
There was some conversation, but that wasn't the primary focus that they focused on. Transit was part of it, but there were other things that they were looking at mainly in those meetings.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they were
Thanks.
really looking at what capital improvements could be done to improve
Yes.
congestion.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes, Director Bush.
In the Public Transit Committee notes number 5, coordinate with Cherriots to identify projects to improve transit time reliability. I know that we are working on getting our IT up and on-time performance with our buses. Is that feeding into this
Yes,
discussion?
that ties directly into this. So transit signal priority, green light extension, those are pieces that work with that. And I can tell you that when I first came to work for Cherriots, the city was not terribly open to that conversation, and now they are supportive and working cooperatively and working with us in a very supportive manner.
And I noticed as well in attending the San Kaiser Area Transportation Study meetings, that group is also working well with that.
Yes.
Other questions? I personally feel this is going in the right direction because in the future, transit's going to play a more important role in keeping the city mobile, and there are many aspects of this, carpool or van pools, carpools, and I support a high capacity transit link between West Salem and the downtown area to take some of the pressure off the bridges. We could leave the vehicles in West Salem and bring the people over here to work and shop and solve those problems a lot less than other infrastructure issues. But anyway, thank you for a good report.
Welcome.
And with that, we'll move on to our next item, which is the performance report for the third quarter.
Sure. Chris French will make the presentation.
Good evening, President Krebs and members of the board. Just as I start here, I handed out a couple items to you guys, or Linda did, and they are 2 tables and 3 slides. Those pages are page 33 and 34 of the board packet, are the tables, and then 42 is, the 3 slides are from page 42. So I will move forward with my presentation, but that's what that information is, some corrections that we found that needed to take place. I'm here to present on FY19 quarter 3 performance report. This covers January through March of 2019. We will look at changes by service first, and this compares FY18 to FY19. We'll look at the Cherriots local system first. Our revenue hours per day are up 13.3, a 2% increase, and revenue miles are up as well. And we have a decrease in ridership. The revenue hours are up. We extended the Route 11 to the jail and added revenue hours in the last year. And I'll talk more about the boardings being down. It looks kind of bad there, and we've had some fluctuation, but as we move to the next slide, it'll be a little clearer what is going on, possible, or is going on. So this looks at average daily boardings per day. And if you look at January, we were pretty much level. And if you look at February, we took a huge drop. And if you look at the trend lines, those trend lines usually in February, we see an increase. In February, we had some really bad weather throughout the month of February, which had a drastic effect on our ridership. And then as you see, coming into March, we're a little bit lower, but still tracking pretty close to where we were a year ago. Cherriots Regional revenue hours and revenue miles are up. This is with, sorry, for the revenues hours are up. We had in FY18, our contractor was under reporting their hours and undercharged, and that has been found and was corrected. They're not, it's not being back billed or anything like that. It was just they misbilled, and these are corrected numbers, and so we show an increase from last year over this year. Cherriots Shop and Ride is down across the board. This is a demand response service, and as demand is lower, the ridership and all of those numbers decrease. Cherriots Lift as well. This is a trend that's we're excited to see. We've been seeing revenue hours and revenue miles over the past few quarters going up with fewer riders, and we've worked on managing that Lyft contract and bringing those hours down and being more efficient. Next, we'll look at totals by service year over year, or comparing year FY18 to FY19 year to date. And you can see that revenue hours are very slightly up year to date. Revenue miles are up, and we are still a little bit below on our year-to-date boardings. The regional system, revenue hours are up, revenue miles are up, but we're also up, boardings are up for the regional system year over year. Cherriots Shop and Ride, revenue hours are up, and miles and boardings year to date, year over year. And Cherriots Lift, revenue hours are pretty close to even, and revenue miles are up, and boardings are down a little. Next, we'll look at changes by route. First, we'll look at our corridor routes. We have a target boarding for 20 boardings per revenue hour, and we have 6 of our routes that are at that level. The 11 is close and has a decrease. When you add revenue hours and ridership doesn't grow, you have a decreased number. We extended the 11 to Marion County Correctional Facility to provide service to the Amazon facility and other facilities out there. And the Amazon facility still hasn't opened, so that extension really hasn't seen the potential for growth that we're expecting when that facility opens. Coverage routes, we are looking at 3 of the routes are meeting our 10 boardings per hour, and the other routes are below that. Coverage routes, we have a goal of 10, and we want to try to make them as efficient as possible, but if you don't have coverage to bring people to those real high-frequency routes, the high-frequency routes will suffer as well. Boarding per revenue hour on the local express routes, local and express routes. The Route 1X is showing a slight increase. The 40X is performing very well above our standard of 10 boardings per revenue hour. And then the others are performing not as well, but are vital to our community in the regional areas. As with our demand response service, demand response is based on how many people call in, and you can see that all of them are trending lower. And with that, I can answer any questions that you have.
Do we have any questions? Director
Just
Bush.
a comment. I appreciate the extra title you put on your slides, like the local bus service. These are our corridor routes, or our main core, as compared to our coverage routes. That helped me understand a little bit better. Oh, that makes sense. So that just extra clarification there was appreciated.
Other questions? Well, we're hopeful that bad weather was the result of the lower ridership, and that'll come up as we get into the summer season and so forth, especially with our new student bus fares coming online.
Yeah.
Yes.
I should say youth bus fares. You don't have to be a student. You just have to be in that age group.
6 to 18.
Yes. Thank you. And our next report is from Trip Choice.
I'd ask Roxanne Belts to please come up.
Got switched around. That's right. Good evening, President Krebs, members of the board. I'm here to present the third quarter report for the Trip Choice program. So staff has been working, conducting a lot of outreach to a variety of our employer sites over the last quarter, and we always offer information about our Group Pass program and then our other services. And so these contacts that we make, they definitely continue to build on the relationships that we have with these employers, and typically gives us a foot in the door. And so we ask them about their current commute programs, as well as work with them to attend any career fairs they might have, health and wellness events, and then explore other opportunities that we have to share information. And you can see this is a typical list of some of the employers we've done outreach with. Of note is Amazon. As Chris said, they have not yet opened their site. We are working with them. They do have their own internal commute trip reduction program that they run at every site. We have talked with them about some of the issues of citing the bus stop, et cetera, and so they are willing to have us come in and talk with their people. We'll see what we can offer them on top of what they already offer to their employees now, but they are willing to talk with us once they start having their hiring events. We also do community outreach at these events that we did in the last quarter. We distributed our regional bike maps, lots of wander walks maps, about 200 blinky lights, and about 150 bike light sets, which is a front light and a back light for a bicycle. So. And of course, we always like to post information online. We posted 26 times on our Facebook page and our Instagram page. So we like to include information about events that we're attending, share safety tips while biking in the winter, because remember, back in January it was winter. Education on park and rides. We wanted people to celebrate spring. We talked about pedestrian safety, promoting ODOT's annual transportation options survey that helps us gather information about who's doing what in the region. And another post featured a series of the Wander Walks maps, and staff created that reached 2,656 people with 120 post engagements, and then 9 people shared that campaign after we posted it. So overall, in the third quarter, we actually reached about 6,800 people through Facebook and Instagram.
A little bit of update on Valley Van Pool. We support 45 vans that serve over 400 commuters. That's the entire Valley Van Pool program. In our region, we have about 27 vans now. We have one vendor in the market that we're working with, Enterprise, currently. One of our partners, Smart, up in Wilsonville, has put out an RFP looking for an additional vendor in the hopes that there are other vendors in the market that we could work with. So if they secure a new vendor, we may also talk about contracting, because, you know, when you've got two vendors in the market, they sharpen their pencils and numbers get a little bit better for the riders. So we will be changing the name of Valley Van Pool in the fall to Van Pool Northwest. We felt Valley Van Pool was too narrow of a focus, and we really want to make sure that if we have other areas, Bend, the Rogue Valley, and I just said Valley, if we have other organizations that want to be part of our program, because we have such a great marketing base, that it's inclusive for anyone in the state of Oregon to participate. And that does also mean we'll be rewrapping the vans, and we're going to be working with one of ODOT's marketing vendors to redesign the logo in the van. It is a little dated at this point. We always do our annual poster contest. We had 350 posters this year from 15 area high schools and middle schools. The judges chose 14 winning posters, 7 from each category. And then the Trip Choice staff gets to go out and to recognize the schools. This year, for the first time in the contest history, all 3 of the winning high school posters were all from Sprague High School, all from one high school. So we arranged to have all 3 of the posters on one bus. We had, you know, winner on the right side, second place on the other side, and then the tail had the third place winner. We took the bus out there, so the students always get very excited when they see their poster. And we actually even worked it out so that that bus was on the route serving Sprague, so they could see the poster for the whole month. And of course, those winning images go into the 2020 calendar. And so just so you can see, here is the winner, first place in the middle school category. And then here is the winner for the first place in the high school category. And that actually was done by a student that's not in one of the art classes. Her mother worked for Marion County, and she'd seen the calendar year after year and said, I want my daughter to enter. So she entered. So when she was announced, the art teacher didn't even know who the student was, but they were really excited. And of course, she gets a brand new bicycle for her winning entry. Now back to the database, and this will probably be the last time you will hear me say Drive Less Connect. The new database will launch. It's a tool that's been purchased by ODOT. It's called Get There. And so from now on, I'll be talking about the numbers in Get There. What that means is these 2 slides are going to change, because total number of users that are in the database now will not necessarily transition over to the new database. I'm sure there are people that we will not automatically transition all of these accounts over. So we will be encouraging people we'll send them messages, we'll encourage them to re-up their membership into the new Get There tool, but I suspect these numbers will go down. So next quarter, I'll explain that again, but it won't surprise me if the numbers are lower. So we sort of started a new baseline again, and then grow the numbers in the database from there. We always want to talk about safety, and as I said, at our partner events, we did do an event at the City of Independence. It was a pedestrian and safety fair. They've never done one before, attended by about 75 people, and we ended up actually giving away about 50 bike light sets. Lots of kids showed up. It was a really good event, a little rainy that day, but I think we'll definitely partner with them again. And then we did 150 bike light sets at the other schools and the wellness events that I've already mentioned. So program work, we have been working with Willamette University students on some behavior change projects. The desired outcome of that group project is to assess transit usage among Willamette University student population, identify possible barriers they have, and then to develop a strategic plan to encourage students to utilize public transportation more, as well as utilize some of the other services that we have. Outreach events that will take place on campus, and a student survey will be conducted, and then we'll continue to be a resource to those student groups as they work on their messaging, making sure it's consistent with the language and the communication that we do here. And then the Cherriots Trip Choice team, we did decide to return to a leadership position in management of the Open Street Salem event. It had gotten a little bit, no one really knew who was in charge, and so we thought this is a great opportunity for us to step back up and manage this project. The good news is we're going to have the event on September 7th. The bad news is that's 107 days away. So we're working on the planning process. We're still working with the city to determine the route. It will be focused on the downtown transit mall, but obviously an open streets event means we need to close some streets. So we're working with the city, what we can close, what types of events and functions we can have during the day. We want to do some demonstration projects on what it could look like if you close a street and have a parklet or have Foursquare or hopscotch, different things like that. And we'll do our infamous melon drop somewhere just to make sure we show safety wearing helmets. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Do we have any questions? Always enjoy your report. It's so dynamic.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Mhm. Thank you. Our next report is our financial report for the third quarter.
Sure, I'll ask Al McCoy to please come forward.
Good evening, President Krebs and members of the board. I'm here to present the third quarter financial report, which covers the period from July 1st of 2018 to March 31st, 2019. In your packet, we'll begin on page 59, looking at the general fund. In the general fund, our total operating revenues year-to-date are at 65% of the annual budget. This includes the category of passenger fares, which are at 66% of the total. This is under the 75% level we would have anticipated to have been received at this point. We have received slightly more than what we budgeted in property taxes this year, which is a good thing. And also our Oregon State in lieu payments are on budget right now. We don't show that on this quarter report because the third quarter's payment was received by us on April the 2nd, so it didn't make it into the report, but we know that we are on target there. And advertising continues to perform above the budgeted level at 131% of the annual budget, so that's good news. At the bottom of page 9, total operating expenditures of the general fund are just slightly over the budget at 76% of the total annual budget at this stage through the end of the third quarter. The divisions within the general fund are shown on this slide, and you'll see that the range anywhere from communications, which was at 67% of total budget, to operations, which was at 77% of their annual budget at the end of March. In the Transportation Programs Fund, this is on pages 61 and 62 in your packet, the total fund expenditures are at 75% of total annual budget. There are two operations programs, which I mentioned to you last quarter in my report, Cherriots Lift and Cherriots Shop and Ride, that we are tracking, and we will be coming to you at the June board meeting to resolve the over budget situation with those two programs, one of which is finance fault for doing the allocation incorrectly with the elimination of NIMIT and the allocation of the call center cost. We're overburdened on Cherriots Lift, so we'll need to do a reallocation and redistribute those costs. The other on Chariot Shop and Ride, we're over budget because the contracted transportation costs have exceeded their budget up until recently, and I understand that's a strategic decision has been made once we understood that we were over budget on the hours. So we're going to see how that tracks. I think they have made improvements the last couple of months, but they are still over year to date. On the converse side, transportation development, the other division that has budget in the Transportation Programs Fund, is their they're at 50% of total annual budget. And their special transportation coordination is only at 30% of its annual budget. This is because of a timing lag in reimbursing our subrecipients for their third quarter's program costs, and this is not unusual. So that won't be an issue by the end of the year. This slide shows the capital fund budget, which is on page 63 and 64 in your packet. Revenues in the capital project fund remain at last quarter's 17% of annual budget. We have not received any, or we have not filed for any claims in the third quarter to be reimbursed for. We will be getting some in the fourth quarter, and then also we will get some that we will be able to accrue into the fourth quarter. But we always have a lag because we're reimbursed by the granting agencies after we file for the costs that we incur. On the expenditure side, we're at 25% of budget, which is a little bit better than we were last year or the previous year. And outlays for the Kaiser Transit Center signalization project, purchase of regional vehicles, a visitor intercom and access control project at Del Webb, and several smaller projects will be incurring cost this final quarter of the year. I do anticipate, even with the improved expenditure trend, that we will have a significant level underspending in the capital fund at year end, but it will be much better than the previous 2 years. And that is my report. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain.
Questions or comments? It looks like we're pretty much on track, though, as far as being on budget.
Right.
Got a
Nothing
few things that
unusual.
need to be adjusted.
Sorry, I do have one.
Yes.
I know that
Director
Marcia's
Bush.
not here, but I know she'd be really excited about the advertising being performing so excellently. I think it's
Yes.
great.
Yes.
I think one of the things, though, about the advertising, it's a very, very small amount of our budget, so, but it does contribute a little bit.
But we're happy to see it doing so well.
Yes.
I get a lot of comments from the constituents. Oh, I saw the bus had this one and had that one, so they're doing good.
It also gives a medium to our local businesses to advertise their wares, so that's another nice feature. Other comments? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank all of the staff for the very good reports that you had this evening. And now I'll call on our general manager for his report.
So thank you. So at the beginning of the meeting, I did show the video that was at the APTA Mobility Conference. So I just want to talk about a few things that happened there. First off is actually that it's now a mobility conference. This is the old bus and paratransit conference. And over the last year, really, at least my work on the board there at APTA has been to really, I guess what we'll call modernize public transportation and really look at the changing needs and how people are now going from, standing at a bus stop to more wanting personalized transit and incorporating technology into how the commute experience works. And so this conference was rebranded as the Mobility Conference and really had a huge mobility focus, especially with the multitude of pilot projects that are going out around the industry. and really changing that mobility thinking in the industry, which dovetails nicely into our strategic plan, because if you look, as we look into the future, it moves us into becoming really what a mobility integrator, and how we can take the lead in the Mid-Valley to make sure that mobility is keeping up with the technology and the needs of people. In addition to that, there was also the slew of committee work that I participated in. So we had our board meeting there, which was pretty much normal business, but I did want to talk about the legislative steering committee work that I sit on as the chair of the Small Operations Committee. We had a half-day session really working, refining, which I think is turning into an outstanding document on the set of APTA's priority recommendations for the reauthorization of the transportation bill after FY 2020. And the principles and the priorities for the Small Operations Committees are really molding in nicely. I think the most important aspect that we now have on paper is reestablishing the 40-40-20 funding ratio between capital improvement grants, state of good repair, and bus facilities. And now our recommendation has that being achieved in year 2. For some of those that haven't been in transit for the last 10 years, that used to be the funding ratio, and then MAP 21 just decimated bus facility transportation funding. And so we are looking to reestablish that. And so that is coming along nicely, and it dovetailed also the Small Operations Committee. For the first time ever, we're doing our summer planning meeting in Washington, D.C. For the first time, so we can also conduct a small operations fly-in and visit key members of both the House and the Senate. We have 11 meetings scheduled already, and there's about 14 of us coming from the Small Ops Committee to spend the day advocating the reauthorization from a small operator's perspective. And so that's pretty exciting. Usually it's just the business members who do that, so we are taking the lead from an agency perspective. In addition to that, another important piece of the mobility conference was the bus rodeo. And as you know, we held our bus rodeo last summer, and Dan Miller, transit operator Dan Miller, won the rodeo. And so this weekend, the International Bus Rodeo, which had 78 contestants, happy to say that Dan Miller came in 17th out of 78
Nice.
Overall. I will say he was the best show in Oregon. He outperformed both TriMet and Lane Transit District operators. But when you talk Pacific Northwest, if you talk about Washington and Oregon, there was 11 transit agencies competing. The winner was from Intercity Transit in Olympia, Washington. And second place was Ben Franklin Transit in the Tri-Cities area of Richland, Washington. So congratulations to them. 4 Pacific Northwest agencies came in the top 10 and 9 in the top 27. So we were happy with our fellow Northwest contingent there. They did a great job representing all of us. And I haven't seen the outcome yet, but one of the big things is a swap meet where all the contestants trade pins and T-shirts and various memorabilia. But I did see Dan get his luggage at the airport, had a whole suitcase full of stuff. So it was a good weekend. He did a great job representing the district, and you can be proud of his efforts. In addition to that, I am going to have to look at this because this just happened today. So at the federal level, the House Appropriations Subcommittee marked up the THUD bill, which is the Transportation and Housing and Urban Development's appropriations for fiscal year 2020, and it was good news for public transits. In the bill, it continued funding public transportation at the $16.2 billion mark for public transportation, $13.5 billion for public transit, and $2.7 for passenger rail. The most significant piece, and I'll send the full report tomorrow in my weekly report, was that in the bus facilities competitive grants, it provided $827 million, which is $483 million more than that was authorized in the FAST Act. So when you talk about at budget time why we pay our membership into APTA and the Bus Coalition, this is why. $483 million above what was authorized in the Transportation Act, which is just unheard of, and it was actually the biggest plus up of any accounts. Another important piece of that is we are advocating that they use the plus up amounts for the reauthorization of the FAST Act and don't go back to what the marks were since the last 3 years we've seen plus ups. So that elevates the floor for the next 6-year bill. So good news there, although there is still work to do. It goes to the House, the full House in June after the memorial recess, and then they'll have to confer on the Senate side. But certainly a great start to that. In addition to that, if you read in the news earlier this week, the congressional leadership did meet with the White House on transportation and infrastructure. That didn't go so well, but hopefully that was just politics and posturing. But we will continue to follow on. You'll read in the report there that Representative DeFazio says we'll still keep working on infrastructure, transportation infrastructure. Well, global infrastructure may not be moving forward. They do believe they can continue working on transportation. And to help with that, 2 days ago, Representative Earl Blumenauer introduced the Rebuild America Act of 2019, which is to take the Chamber of Commerce recommendation to implement a gas tax, a 5-cent increase in gas tax for each of the next 5 years, and then index that to inflation. But it also included some language that would require Congress to replace the gas tax with a more equitable, stable funding source within 10 years, which is really the big problem with the transportation bill, is how to pay for it, because in the last at least 8 years, there's been a general fund contribution to maintain the public transportation programs. So we will follow that closely to see where that leads us, but certainly, for the most part, good news at the legislative level. And then I guess you mentioned it earlier, but just a reminder, the youth bus fare change takes effect June 1st, and so we'll be monitoring that to see what impact. I imagine we won't really see the impact of that till the school starts up, but hopefully we'll see some of the youth buying passes this summer for use. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Well, my report, I always bring these little cards to show, so I have a little card on the youth fair, and starting next month, that's only like 10 days away, you can buy a youth pass for $10 a month, and you can ride, a single ride is 50 cents, and a day pass is $1. So that's a good feature coming up in just a few days. And the other thing is, reminder, it's 107 days until we start Saturday service. It's been over a decade since we've had Saturday service, and so you can see that we're all really excited about that. This month, I didn't have as many hours of service because we had a very short board meeting, and our May work session was very short. We didn't have that much business. The biggest item of business here in the Transit Board was our budget committee, and we do have a budget that we'll be approving at the next board meeting. I met with one of our new board appointees who's going to take office in July, just to discuss general things about the board. I attended the Chamber Forum luncheon. I attended 2 neighborhood associations, including the Morningside annual meeting, and I staffed a table for Cherriots at the annual meeting of the Morningside group. I attended the Association of Oregon Rail and Transit Advocates, which was held at Mission Mill here in Salem. We brought them to Salem so they leave a few dollars here in our local economy. And that and a little planning with the general manager for our meetings was about all I did this month, but kept me busy. So I'm going to start this way and end with Director Bush. Director Lincoln?
I also attended the board meeting and the work session and the budget meetings. But I was out of town quite a bit, so I didn't make it to the OMPOC meeting, which Director Bush is going to report on, nor the area commissions on transportation meeting, which Marcia Kelly will report on maybe next week. I did go to the Kaiser Festival luncheon, along with Bob. You were there too, Director, President Krebs, and Director Bush. And also met with one of the new board members, which was very nice to meet and talk to. And that's about it.
And Director Thompson?
Well, mine is short also. Attended of course, our regular meetings, but also the Chamber Policy Committee. And we talked about the city's water conditions and how they're going to make them better this year and not have the same problem we had last year. I hope they're right. Attended the SEDCOR breakfast yesterday, and it was on the economy of the state. And it also spent a lot of time on the PERS situation. And being a PERS retiree, it was a little sensitive in some points. Met with my successor, Ian, out there in the audience, and spent some time with him, briefing him on what I know. And of course, he got that in a real short period of time. Attended the Salem, or the transportation funding, the Special Transportation Funding Committee, and we looked at the coordinated plan again, a little bit more polishing on that, and the responses that the committee members had provided and were integrated into it. And I don't think we have to approve that, so it's just an internal document at this point. And always talked about some legal things also. And that's about it.
Thank you. Director Bush, and you're kind of isolated down there tonight, but...
I was wondering if I'd done something wrong.
You're sitting with Ben.
Well, sitting here with our lawyer may keep me in line here. I attended the same meetings, the board meeting, work session. I didn't get to stay for the budget committees completely because I was part of a local theater group performing Annie. I was not Annie, I was in the pit, so I got to play the fun music. I also participated in another week of outdoor school, so it was a very busy May for me. I attended several city things, Coffee with Kathy, a council meeting. I went to the Marion County Commissioners Breakfast, so they always meet with 3 members of the Kaiser City Council, and I sit in on to have ears out and keep us informed and them informed. I did go to OMPOC, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. I attended the Senate hearing for our new board members, and that was a new experience all the way around, so it was very informative to be part of that. I helped with the Kaiser Fest a little bit, and Kaiser Fire District did their budget as well, so I participated in that. And I will go to OMPOC. Too many papers. It was in the middle of going from here and there, and I'm surprised I could find my notes after that. They talked about, at one point, what was called the Oregon Travel and Behavior Household Activity Survey. And that was done in July of 2018. And they just did an overview report on everybody's travel behavior. And they wanted to do another survey. I don't remember what that part. That's gone. I'll have to find that out and report on it in June. No, I won't be here in June. I apologize. Anyway, we talked about the STIF funding update, that 18 of the 42 entities that applied for monies had been approved. And this was at the end of April when the meeting happened. And then when the money's going to be dispersed. We talked about that. And then talk about the 2019 legislative session at the point of the meeting, and the carbon legislation, the TNC bill, transportation network companies, spoke about different amendments that were part of that, addressing the climate-related transportation issues, and also the bills that were part of that, the cap and invest bill. Evidently, there's a new director coming for the Oregon Department of Transportation, and I don't remember the current director's name. Matt?
Garrett.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, they talked about his retirement is going to be the third Thursday of June at Mission Mill, so watch for that information so we can send him out with a good time. Talked about safe routes to school. There was 112 applications, and 80% of the projects were signed and underway at the point of the meeting. Then 2020 will begin a new round of federal funds. And they talked about having an OMPOCT event just to get more information out for the Oregon Municipal Planning Organizations Consortiums and their purposes. So their suggested topics on climate change and transportation, land use and transportation, freight transport, how that's affecting transportation in the state, and even speaking of delivering goods, there's many more people who are ordering goods and having it delivered to their homes, which is causing more congestion. So how all that is working together. So that was most of that. And I have one last thing I want to say. I won't be here in June, so I won't get to say my goodbyes to our retiring board members, but I want to sincerely thank Marcia, Kathy, and Steve and Jerry for all they have done for the Salem Area Mass Transit District during your terms of public office. Cherriots has become what it is today in large part because of your hard work and dedication over the years, and we're going to miss you tremendously. From route changes to new buses to shelter issues, serving our riders, working with employee bargaining, city councils, neighborhood associations. We are part of the whole network in many ways, and you have represented the district well. And so have they. They're not here. Thank you for mentoring me as a new board member. Especially when I first came on, it was a pretty difficult time. Thank you for teaching me how to represent and serve the people and their public transportation needs. And we will lean on those foundations you've set up, and we'll miss you tremendously.
Thank you.
So thanks.
And our general manager has one more item.
I forgot to mention in my reports that so last weekend was the Iris Festival, and we did have the Iris Parade. And as you know, we always have a bus in there, and our bus looked fantastic. So congratulations and thanks to the marketing and communication staff for putting that together. And we were recipients of the Iris Award. So well done, and thank Operator John Welch for driving the bus in the parade. It looked like it was a good day.
It was great.
That's it. Yeah.
Is there anything else that the board would like to discuss, or are we?
Nope.
I would just announce that the next meeting of the board will be Thursday, June 27th, in this room at 6:30 p.m., and there will be a reception for our retiring board members at 6 o'clock, so if anybody would like to come. So that's Thursday, June 27th, 6 o'clock for the reception, 6:30 for the board meeting. And with that, we are adjourned.